some other occasions. I met him in Kwando, and we had a very warm handshake, and we exchanged, pleasantries. There's sometimes you sit next to him, he's not in the mood to speak, to talk. But there's sometimes you sit next to him and he's in the mood to talk. So,
and in all this, how do you receive it? When he's in a good mood, when he's in a bad mood?
Oh,
how do you take it?
You have to learn in which mood he is and adjust accordingly. But I don't have any problem with President Rawlings. Indeed, he gave me my opportunities in life. I mean, when I came in as a young member of parliament, it was his appointment as deputy minister that got me noticed, and then from there he appointed me as Minister of Communications until we left office in 2001. And so I don't have absolutely anything against President Rawlings, and I think we belong to the same party.
He's criticized your administration.
Yes.
And still don't have anything against the criticisms?
Well, he's criticized many administrations. He's criticized Kufuor's administration. He's criticized Professor Mills's administration. He's criticized my administration. And so it's his human right to do so. If he thinks that things are not going right, it's his right to offer that criticism. And you take it in good faith. I mean, if you think that the criticism is valuable, you take it. If it's not, you discuss. When you're president, you have to take decisions on a daily basis. And you must listen to criticism and listen to people. But eventually, the decision is yours to take. And so there might have been times where he makes a suggestion, and based on the information I have from national security and intelligence, I realize that he does not have as much information as I have. And so I take a decision that might be contrary to his. Of course, you won't be happy, and so he'll criticize you, but that's what governance is about. That's what the presidency is about. Your
Excellency, let's talk about this description of Ghana as the beacon of democracy in Africa, and consider the facts that we have on the ground. And some believe, for instance, I recall what happened in Cherponi during the by-election, then in Talensi during a by-election. And I recall I was actively involved in covering the Supreme Court hearing of the 2012 election petition, where Justice Atoguba complained bitterly about how politicians make us all sit on tenterhooks every 4 years. I mean, so when you know about all these factors and the fact that every 4 years before elections, we have to spend millions of Ghana cedis just campaigning for peaceful election, it should tell you that we are not that peaceful. We are not that, there's some tension somewhere that we need to deal with. Do we deserve that title, the beacon of democracy in Africa?
I think that Ghana has earned it. I mean, 7 successful elections under our belts is not common in Africa. And so...
Your Excellency, I'm sorry to cut in, but when you talk about 7 successful elections, the 2004 election was contested by your party. 2012 election was contested by the NPP. Successful elections, how do we define what a successful election is?
Let me say something. Our party has always accepted when we lose. It is our opponents who never accept. 2004. In 1992, they described the election as a stolen verdict. In 1996, they described it as the bought verdict. But when they won in 2001, we readily gave power to them. In 2004, Professor Mills conceded the election.
But your party? I remember there was a court case.
That was 2 members of our party decided to go to court, but Professor Mills had conceded. He stood as president. He said he had lost the election. He conceded. He congratulated President Kufuor.
Okay.
So there was no doubt about that. Then in 2008, you remember Professor Mills won. And of course, Nanado was a candidate. He did not congratulate Professor Mills. They didn't concede that election. They even tried to go to court, and all kinds of things happened. 2012 was the worst one. 2012, we went to court for almost 1 year, wasted the whole time, of the government, because we were not sure if we were still the legitimate government or the court decision was going to remove us from office. The international community all decided to wait and see. And so it actually truncated the amount of time we had, to work. But we did our best in 3 years plus to be able to deliver, some of the things we had promised the nation. And then in 2016, we lost. I conceded, you know, immediately. It's not like there were no irregularities. I could have gone around and gathered all kinds of examples of overvoting and tied the nation in court again. But I do think that NDC is playing the game democratically. NPP are the ones that often will never accept when they have lost elections. But be that as it may, I say Ghana has earned the accolade beacon of democracy because the elections have been largely successful. And it's not broken down into violence and bloodshed like we've seen in many other countries. And that's why Ghana continues to be given that accolade. But let me caution, we're entering a very dangerous phase. With the rise of all these vigilante groups, and I've heard some NPP party apparatchiki saying they will not abolish the vigilantes and that they're going to use them, you know, to guard this thing. When we're in government, they said they didn't believe in the police service, and that's why they set up those vigilante groups. And now those vigilante groups are all over the place. And so if the other party also decides to put up vigilante groups all over the place, you can imagine the kind of clashes that we can expect to begin
Your Excellency,
to take place.
Sorry, but in 2009, when the ANC came back, we had similar stories compared to the stories we are hearing now about vigilante groups.
They were isolated. Listen, they were isolated. You had Bamba Boys, which was MPP. You had Azoka Boys, which was NDC. You had Boko Boys. You had something. But these were few groups far in between. Now, there are groups in every region, and they have different accolades.
In every party, in every one of the two
no,
parties?
we don't have. In most regions, we don't have any vigilante groups. No. If you ask to mention any vigilante groups in the NDC, that the only name they will mention is Azoka Boys. That's it.
Is it not because the NDC has found itself in opposition, and that should the NDC return to power, we'll find an emergence of vigilante groups who will be demanding that
no, what I'm saying is that
yes.
what I'm saying is that the NPP in opposition formed those vigilante groups because they said they had no trust in the police service, in the security services to protect them. And so remember, they formed the Bolga Bulldogs. Almost every region has its different name. NDC doesn't have that. But I'm saying that if NDC decided to also in every region set up those vigilante groups, what can we expect? And that is why civil society must speak to this vigilantism in a major way, you know, because it has the tendency to lead us into a spiral of violence, not only in respect of just political clashes, but after politics, after elections, how you handle those boys becomes something. Because these are boys you've trained to be physical and to do all kinds of things, and then you come into office, and that's the problem NPP is suffering. Finding jobs for those boys to keep them busy. Because if they're idle, you never know what they'll get involved in. And so I'm saying that civil society must look into this thing and, you know, come up with prescriptions so that we can resolve these issues, so that we don't enter a more dangerous phase of our democracy than we currently have had. But I think that Ghana's democracy will survive because we have enough level-headed people in our politics. It is when the extremists in our parties take control of the party, that is when you have these issues. I think that the moderates must continue to communicate across party lines and make sure that we keep the political temperature
and
at a reasonable level.
Talking about political vigilante groups and communication within the political circles, you were once upon a time Director of Communications for your party. How difficult was it to, and one of your accolades at the time was the gentleman, the John Mahama, who would never insult another. He would just attack the issue and not the personality. It seems there's a change in trend since some of you left that scene. How difficult was it for you to practice communication in the manner that you did, and how different do you see political communication these days?
I think that there's a difference, both in terms of the content of what we say and then also the mediums that we use to communicate. At the time I was Director of Communications, I mean, how many radio stations really were there? I mean, you had Joy FM leading, Peace FM was just coming, you know, on stream. Radio Gold was about there, but GTV and GBC were still by far the biggest broadcaster. And so I guess it was easier to communicate with the people. And at the time, the language of political discourse was more tempered. Unfortunately, in terms of content of political discourse now, there's a lot of intolerance, there's a lot of insulting, There's no respect for authority. There's no respect for, age, and a lot of things, values that we hold sacred are beginning to break down. But also in terms of the mediums in which these communications take place, they're now so varied, because it's not only the mainstream media now, you have social media has come of age. And people have the anonymity of just sitting with their phones and sending an insulting post, without being seen or known, you understand? And so it's brought a lot of intolerance and insults into our discourse, which is not the best. But it's not only Ghana suffering that, it's all over the world. Twitter, social media has given a certain independence of communication to everybody. So everybody is his own broadcaster now. Because with that little handset, you're broadcasting to the world. Anything you write there is just going into the World Wide Web, and everybody can read it. So
you've occupied the highest office in our land, and you had all the security briefings. Given the chance, would you give some restrictions to social media, for instance?
It's going to be difficult to do. It's not easy.
China has done it, Your Excellency.
Yeah, China has done it, but of course, China has a different culture, and it's at a different stage of development from Ghana. Ghana has enjoyed the freedoms, of expression, and it's very strongly ingrained in our constitution that there shall be no restriction on how people are able to express themselves unless it affects public order and all those other things. And so Ghanaians have really taken that literally, and they've pushed the boundaries of the freedom to express themselves. You cannot now rein that in. But I think that on a worldwide scale, the inventors of Facebook and all of them are beginning to see that these instruments are being used in a negative way. So they themselves are coming up with some instruments to see how they can tamper, some of the things that, are beginning to appear on these mediums. And so if they're able to create those instruments, and government is able to use those instruments to check some of the excesses, not to clamp down on free expression, but check some of the excesses, then that would be the way to go. But for Ghana itself to say, we're going to shut down Facebook or we're going to do this, I don't think it's something that it's not a route that we must follow.
Yeah. For a decade and 2 years, you were a member of parliament, and then you, from 2001 to 2004, you were the parliamentary spokesperson for the minority at the time. Having served so long a period in Parliament, what would you say were some of the major challenges you faced as Parliament? Because the allegation often is that, look, Parliament is not as independent as it should be because the executive has a strong hand in Parliament.
Yeah, it's true. What happens is normally the winning party forms the executive, and often the winning party will have the majority in Parliament. And so you can expect that it will use its majority to be able to push through the legislation and other things that it wants to do. It's natural. And it happens not only here in Ghana, it happens in America. The Republicans have the majority, and recently they pushed through the Trump's tax cuts. Yeah. Same in UK, everywhere. And so it's normal for that to happen. But I do think that Parliament has served us well over the 25 years. It's passed some very important pieces of legislation. And a lot of the time, most of the work in Parliament is done by consensus. We hardly hear about it. It is when the two sides disagree that we get to hear about what is it they are disagreeing about. Then it comes to our notice. So sometimes the impression is created that these two sides are fighting all the time, but that's not true. Many of the legislation that they pass and the bills and the Appropriations Act and all those things are done by consensus. And so I think it served us well. We have some good laws. We have some bad laws. I mean, sometimes you don't know how a law will play out until you start implementing it. But that's why Parliament also has the power of amendment. Because if you start implementing a bill and there are challenges with it, you can always bring it back to Parliament and amend it, to be able to serve the purpose for which you pass the bill.
But to the extent that the Constitution provides that for every government to be able to set itself up, Many, I've forgotten what the percentage is, but the ministers, a certain percentage would have to necessarily come from parliament.
Yes.
And so you have parliamentarians who are seeking for executive positions, and so they are compromised to some extent.
That's true. And that's why during the constitutional review process, the majority of Ghanaians said that they wanted that particular clause in the constitution changed, and that the president should be free to select his ministers from wherever he wants. If he wants to pick them from parliament, leave him. You're giving him a mandate of 4 years, and you've asked him to achieve certain targets. And then you tell him, of the people who will help you achieve the target, you must take 51% of them from among 275 people, and then the rest you can appoint from outside. Why would you need to tie the president's hands? And so he says, leave him free. If he finds good people in parliament, he'll take them. If he finds good people outside parliament, he'll take them. And that's why you notice that sometimes the president has to create minister of state positions in the presidency. That is to balance out vis-a-vis those from outside parliament and those from inside parliament. Because anytime you take, when you reach the 50%, anytime you take one other person from outside, you must create another a minister from parliament in order to meet the constitutional balance. That has been a major bottleneck on presidents. And so I agree. And when I was interviewed by the Constitutional Review Committee, I said that clause should be taken out. You give the president a mandate, leave him to choose his ministers from wherever he wants to choose them from. And so but it needs to be done by referendum. And of course, I'll say one thing. Parliament is not too happy about that. And so you need parliamentary approval, and then you need a referendum. So whether Parliament will agree that they give up the 51% of ministerial positions is another issue.
So whilst taking out that provision, couldn't we also make a new provision that would give parliamentarians that assurance that they so much seek for within the executive?
Actually, let me tell you something. I believe strongly that part of the reason the constitutional review process stalled is because of this particular clause. Parliament has not been interested to move that constitutional review forward. But there are a lot of things in there, including the issue of the Attorney General. We wouldn't have had this problem with the Special Prosecutor, because then it says, okay, separate the Attorney General's office from the Minister of Justice. So the Attorney General becomes independent, and you need a Special Prosecutor because he won't take directions from the President. He does a professional job. But because of the constitutional provision, it says that all prosecutions lie in the hands of the Attorney General. And the Attorney General is also the Minister of Justice, appointed by the President. And so that's how come they've created the Special Prosecutor's office. But in doing that, it doesn't make any difference. That's why I said in Teshiman that the Special Prosecutor is like any state attorney, because one, the Attorney General can file a nolle prosequi in any case that the Attorney General is conducting in the courts. The Special Prosecutor is able to carry out his duties only with the fiat of the Attorney General, and so still you still have the Attorney General in control of the Special Prosecutor's office.
Interesting. And let's talk about the judiciary vis-a-vis the claim that the executive is overly powerful. Do we have an independent judiciary? And would you also say, and since you occupy that office, that you were overly powerful?
I wouldn't say so. Ghana has a system of checks and balances. And I would say that our judiciary in the Fourth Republic has served us well. There are many cases that government has lost. I mean, people take cases to court, and the judiciary uphold their claims against government. Many cases.
The media doesn't hype those ones.
They don't, yeah. Maybe when government wins, then it is more news. But I think the judiciary has been fairly independent, and they've done their job. I mean, if you look at it at the political level, we have issues at the lower level with civil cases, land cases, and so on and so forth. People have accusations that, you know, the cases are skewed in favor of people who pay. You remember Anas's story. Are there any other such issues happening, you know, within the judiciary? Those are issues that keep bubbling up. But the issue of corruption is not peculiar to the judiciary. It also affects the executive, it affects the legislature. So it's a fight that we must take up comprehensively. And I cannot say that the judiciary, is overly corrupt or something. I mean, I think it's something that is spread across. But I must say that on the balance, if you drew a balance sheet of the performance of our judiciary in the Fourth Republic, I would say it's creditable.
Let's look at our transitional processes since the beginning of the Fourth Republic. And currently we know that we have an Administrator General whose office is not known by many Ghanaians. During every transitional process, we hear stories about seizures of cars, sometimes even bungalows belonging to state officials and so on and so forth. There is also the allegation of, victimization of officials of the previous government. You recently have been heard calling on, your supporters to help, those who have been prosecuted within the NCA, for example. What do you make of our transitional processes since the beginning of the Fourth Republic?
For the first time, we handled the transition using a special Presidential Transition Act. And I think that made it a more organized transition than previous ones that we have had. Of course, we normally have the joint transition teams with co-chairs, and so they work together. And according to the new act, 3 months, I think it's 3 months before January 7th, all the ministers are supposed to, it's either 6 months or 3 months, are supposed to have written their handing over notes. And so all the ministers wrote their handing over notes. The handing over notes were given to the Administrator General long before 7th January. And so by the time the transition team was formed and started acting, they had the handing over notes of all the ministers. So I think it went rather smoothly. An inventory list of government assets were taken, including vehicles. And so all those vehicles were parked at the Flagstaff House. And I remember when I took Nana Addo round, and we went into the villa, the presidential villa. We went upstairs, and from the First Lady's bedroom, when we went in there, you could see into the car park. And there was a sea of vehicles, that were associated with the presidency. And so Nana Addo himself said, "What, all those vehicles? These are the vehicles that are being handed over to you, That was about 430 vehicles all parked there. And so I think that this, we'll continue to fine-tune it. And I'm sure that the next transition will be even better.
I'm just a bit curious here, because after you left office, there are allegations of vehicles that could not be traced.
There's 300 vehicles. I mean, where are you going to have 300 vehicles in this country? I mean, it's part of the political rhetoric of demonizing the administration that is leaving, that they've stolen vehicles and, all kinds of things. There might be 1 or 2 vehicles that were misplaced or something, but 300 vehicles missing. I mean, by now, people should have been arrested and prosecuted for stealing 300 vehicles, And so it's all part of the political rhetoric. But I think that the transitions are getting better. The documentation of government assets should be improved, so that registration and licensing of vehicles, we try to do it with this new GV license plates and things. But, sometimes it's like you're swimming upstream. The technocrats and things don't want to, they'll buy a new vehicle, they won't put it on the list, they'll go and register it privately because they want to use it privately. But I said that all government vehicles should carry a GV. I even said that the vehicles I use as president should carry a GV number plate, And I kept insisting. They said, no, national security, for operational reasons, the president's number cannot be known and all that. And of course, national security, they keep changing the president's number so that it doesn't look like it's the same vehicle and all that. But there are things that from government to government we must continue to improve. And so we handed over to Nana Addo. I'm sure that if they continue to improve the inventory list, the assets register and all that, we should be getting, a much better control of government resources.
And before we go, there's one thing I can't resist the temptation to ask you. 2020 is not too far away from today. Are we seeing a comeback?
I'm enjoying my life as it is. It's less stressful. You enter the house, you can see how peaceful the house is, and so I like my new existence. at my age, I don't rule out, still contributing to the politics of our country. But I'll do it in circumstances that are very necessary and compelling. And the issue of selecting a candidate for our party is a duty of the party. And so I said the last time in Takwa that I believe that my announcement of anything will be disruptive. If I say that I want to run, it's going to distract the party's attention from the work that it needs to do this year to be able to reorganize the party. We're going through re-registration, branch and constituency elections and all that. If I also say I'm not running, it will at the same time distract the party, because then other people who want to run would focus the campaign on the presidential rather than doing the heavy lifting of branch re-registration, branch elections and constituency and all that. So I have time on my side. I'm going to continue to work with the party to ensure that we put the party in a shape where it can win the elections of 2020. And if we're able to do that, it doesn't matter who becomes the flag bearer. We'll be able to take MPP out. And that's what I keep telling our executive.
And so you don't mind if,
I'm willing to support anybody the party chooses.
But currently, as the party is still going through that process, you don't mind hearing names pop up as people who have expressed an interest in running on the ticket of the NDC? Not at all. And I'm sure there are many other people in NDC capable of leading the party who have not even expressed interest yet. It will be in the interest of the party to look across the length and breadth of the party and see people with that stature who can lead the party. And if we find anybody, I'm willing to support the person to the hilt. I'll go around with the person all across the country and campaign for that person, him or her. Your Excellency, my very last question before we finally draw the curtains is, so we are celebrating 25 years of the Fourth Republic, and you are confident that the Fourth Republic is going to survive it. It has survived 25 years, and so perhaps in the next 25 years, we'll still be around to witness another celebration.
You'll be around, young man.
I pray you'll be around, Your Excellency. I'm very hopeful you'll be around, sir. So my question is, so in the next 25 years, where would we be? Looking at the trend.
Yeah, that is my worry. If you look at the demographic of Africa, our continent is the fastest growing continent. And so we have like about 12 million young people coming out of school onto the job market in Africa every year, 12 million young people. And in Africa, we're creating only about 4 million jobs a year across the continent. And so 8 million young people every year come and cannot find employment. And so if we don't grow our economics faster and expand our economies, we're going to have this youth bulge. And that's what every government grapples with. That's what we're grappling with. And of course, it became the opportunity for our opponents to say that they were better at creating jobs, and when they come, they're going to employ all the unemployed graduates and so on and so forth. You do artificial youth job creation exercises, youth employment, and things will take 100,000, 200,000. But that's not the problem. The people coming out are more than you can use artificial job creation to do. And so what we need to do is to transform the economy, add value to many of the things we're doing. And that's what we're trying to do, improving the infrastructure, reviving the factories that existed before, the shoe factory, the Commander Sugar factory, and all that. We said that by 2020, we should be processing 50% of our cocoa. And so the processing factories must come here and do the processing so that we can create jobs instead of them taking the raw beans and processing them in China and other places. So there are a lot of things that comprehensively we must do. One, to grow the economy fast enough, because if the economy is growing at 8%, 9%, 10%, that means that it is by itself creating more jobs within the economy, aside from the other major policies in agriculture and industry that you undertake. So that is an overview. Now, the point is, when you talk about the Fourth Republic and the next 25 years, every 4 years we're going to go to elections. When politicians overly promise and they're not able to deliver, it creates a certain dejection in the electorate. And so a time is going to come there's going to be some cynicism about voting. Already you find it. When it's getting to elections, people say, oh, I won't vote. I mean, every 4 years you go and vote. You don't see anything, you understand? And so if that cynicism continues to grow, then it means that the value of our democracy would be affected. And that can be the most serious threat to the survival of the Fourth Republic. And so as politicians, we need to keep an eye on that. We must tell the people what we can do. And that's what I did in the last election. I mean, people came to me and said, oh, your colleagues are promising the moon, you promised the sun. And I said, no, I can't. I've managed the economy, I know the size of the economy, I know what we can do within the next 4 years. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I mean, trainee allowances, it was a matter of principle. You're not able to employ new teachers. You're not able to employ nurses when they come out. Why would you pay them allowances while they're training? At least let them manage to pay the fees while they're training. And then when they come out, you use that money and employ them. 232 million budgeted for trainee allowances. 232 million. If you're paying a nurse, a new nurse earns about 1,100 Ghana cedis. If you have 232 million every year to pay trainee allowances, you will employ about 15,000 nurses. And your backlog is 8,000. So why won't you use that money and employ the 8,000 so that the next batch that comes, you can employ some more? So it's a matter of politics, it's a matter of principle, and so we'll see how it goes. We hope I'm very positive that the Fourth Republic will survive, and I'm very positive that increasingly with awareness, social media and all that, our people are participating actively, and so you cannot deceive them anymore. And that's why there's a bit of disenchantment, even just 1 short year after a government came into power, because they overpromised, they promised heaven, and so people are anxious to see things happen immediately, you know, but we need to see how we can keep a level head and make sure that this nation continues to progress.
Your Excellency, from where I sit as a news reporter, I observed that over the years, in the last 25 years, we have failed as a people, and you as political leaders, to see that governance should be a continuum. And so, for instance, we have lacked a blueprint for our development in the last 25 years. And so, take education, for instance. At a point, at the senior high school level, it became 4 years. Then your government came in 2009 and made it 3 years. And you can look at other sectors and you will not spend too much time to find the examples therein. One government comes and says, this is the way we should go. Another person comes and says, that's the way we should go. For instance, under your watch, we had what became known as Doomso, but you ensured that the ships from the car power ship came, and then the second one arrived not too long ago. That should be a continuum. But I don't see you as political leaders acknowledging each other very often and saying that this person did this work to this extent and we are adding on. Usually everybody wants to go on. The thing is, you always blame all political leaders. Blame the NPP. When Professor Mills came into office, Professor Mills acknowledged before and everything he did. I'm sorry, but we never stopped a single project. There was the affordable housing project. You came with the STX. No, but we continued affordable. We gave it to SNIT. And some of those houses are occupied today. We did not discard it. So STX was additional. We wanted to make one big addition to housing, but we did not jettison affordable. We gave affordable to State Housing Corporation and to SNIT. And today, if you go to whatever the name is of the motorway, there are people living in those flats. Those flats are being sold today because of the work that we did on it. We didn't stop it. And there are no projects that the Kufuor administration started that we stopped. We made all of them continue. And so, put the blame where it is. There's one party, when they come, they don't want to continue things that they don't want to give credit. When Dam was completed, I invited President Kufuor and acknowledged him for being the one who initiated it. Yes. I mean, what do you gain? What do you gain trying to appropriate a project somebody else started? I mean, give credit where it's due, and then you continue yours. You'll be giving credit where it's due. I mean, we believe in that. We don't have a problem. So don't include us in that basket of politicians when you say, just say who are the ones who do that kind of thing. But you're right. Yes. Government should be a continuum. You know, this start, stop. Every 8 years, you stop, and then you go through the learning curve again. What this government is going through is what we went through from 2013 to 2015 until we went to the IMF. And so if you just continue from where we left off,
you wouldn't have a problem. But when you come and you say you're going to reduce taxes, that's when you have a problem. And so you start taking taxes off, and so government revenue suffers. And so right now, the major problem government has is collecting enough revenue. So now you turn around and with another hand, you're collecting tax on mobile money and introducing the same nuisance taxes that you accused another government of introducing. You know, so we'll get there. We'll get there.
God willing. And finally, Your Excellency, the 25 plus.
This is your third
million,
finally.
Yes, because well, this is the final.
Okay.
The 25 million plus people who you superintended over for 4 years are watching you right now, and they would want a message of hope from you as we celebrate 25 years of the Fourth Republic. What would you tell them?
I'll tell all our people that we have no other country but Ghana, and all of us must have that belief that we can make our country better. And I believe that in this year and going forward, the media should help us. It's not everything that is a failure in Ghana. There are a lot of successes we've chalked, but unfortunately as a country, we concentrate on where we failed and do not trumpet our successes. I mean, from 1992, this economy has expanded at the fastest rate ever in the history of Ghana. We've moved more people out of poverty and hunger since 1992 than any other era in the period of Ghana. And so democracy is paying dividends, but the point is the media and everybody else is not highlighting it. All we're focusing on is where there's no school and children are under trees. But what of the 5,000 new schools that have been built where children are? And I notice that the media always goes and looks for where the road has not been done. They go and look for where the drain has not been done. They go and look for where people are defecating in the bush. But then they do go and look at where a new road has been done and talk to the drivers. How do you feel since this road was done? You understand? So while showing the things that are yet to be done, you must also champion what has been done and show how it has improved the life of the people. You come from the Upper West region.
I do.
You remember how it was on the Solafufoso Road and how many hours it took to drive to Tamale?
5 hours plus? Yes.
More than 8 hours almost. Now, a driver can go from Wa to Tamale, load back from Tamale, and go back and sleep.
In fact, I have driven on that road for 2.5 hours from Tamale to Wa.
Yes.
Yes.
And yet I haven't seen any media house go and interview any drivers and say, how do you find...
Excellence, we have done that.
Oh, you have, okay.
We have done that. And
well, but that's why maybe GBC deserves the TV license.
All right, thank you very much. We have been speaking with the former president of the Republic of Ghana, former President John Dramani Mahama, and he has been giving us his opinions on the Fourth Republic, and he expresses hope that this republic has survived so far and will survive. He ever cautions that it will not come on a silver platter. We need to work towards the survival and the maintenance of the Fourth Republic. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. Once again, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for accepting us into your home and for granting us this very first interview of yours after you left office to a local media house. Thank you. We'll meet you again some other time.